Town Band Banter with Doc and Dave. Every week, two longtime friends and colleagues in the world of music, David Price and Donald Doc Smith, get together to discuss the triumphs as well as the twists and turns of lifelong learning for the dedicated members of thousands of civilian community music ensembles of every shape and size. Your comments and suggestions are always welcomed through email as info@townbandbanter.com, Facebook, Town Band Banter, and Instagram, #TownBandBanter. And now for our hosts, Doc and Dave.
All right, Dave, here we go. Can you imagine season 2, episode 12?
No, wait a minute. No, you're wrong. It's episode 4,520.
No. It's episode 12.
I can't believe we've done that many.
We didn't do that many. That's why it's hard to believe. And 12 is our lucky number because we have with us today an old friend from when he lived up this way.
I don't think it's very appropriate you call him old.
A well-seasoned friend.
Yes.
He was the captain of the incredible United States Coast Guard Band, one of the best bands in the world.
Yeah.
I mean, there's just no way doing that, and I feel guilty that I don't get down to hear them as often. It's a free concert. It's 45 minutes away. I think I've become a Rhode Islander because that seems like a far trip now.
You're right, it is.
When you live in Rhode Island, you need to pack a lunch and maybe consider getting a hotel if it's over a half an hour trip. Right. And I need to get the Jamestown Band down for one of those concerts. About half of them have seen it, but not others, and we need to do that sometime soon. But welcome aboard, Captain Lew Buckley, and welcome aboard, Lew.
Thank you.
Yes. So I thought we'd start out with some things that I didn't know about you, how you got started in music. Like, I'm not sure exactly where you're from. It's kind of like in the military, it's kind of tough to figure out where people originated and how you got into trumpet. And you're an outstanding trumpet player, we know, and even better as a conductor. But how did all of that happen, like a thumbnail sketch of getting you all the way up to Coast Guard level?
Well, I was born in Ohio. That's where my parents were from. But my dad had some sort of a sinus situation, and his doctor told him he had to get out of the North if he was ever going to be comfortable. So we came to Florida, believe it or not. And he was a animal husbandry major in college.
Interesting.
And he got a job building a cattle ranch down here in Florida. So I grew up as a working cowboy, riding, roping, the whole 9 yards.
I'll be damned.
How cool.
But the music came into it because my mother was the town piano teacher, and she was the organist, and Dad was the choir director at the local Methodist church.
Good.
And so I started piano at 5, and then got my first trumpet for Christmas when I was 8.
Wow.
And I was really, really lucky because it was a small town, with 2,000 people. The whole school of 12 grades only had 200 kids.
Wow.
But you could get into the quote-unquote high school band in 6th grade if you could walk and chew gum at the same time.
Yeah, for sure.
So I had the opportunity to start going to district and state contests in 6th and 7th grade.
Fantastic.
Whereas my peers all had to wait till they were in high school.
Right.
But then we moved to Miami, and I went from a town of 2,000 to a high school of 4,000.
Right, yeah.
And just the opposite situation, a wonderful band. I was even able to take music theory in high school, which was pretty unusual in those days. And lots of playing opportunities, both as a jazz player and as a legit player.
Right.
Managed to get into the Eastman School of Music for college.
Fantastic.
And then when I got out of Eastman, went looking for a job in the military. And the Coast Guard Band had the opening that fit me perfectly. I could stand up on the stage and play Rafael Mendez and Herbert L. Clark and all of that stuff, and that's what they were looking for.
Oh, wow. Okay, so you were the soloist, cornet soloist?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I was.
Cool.
And principal trumpet.
Right, yeah.
And then after I'd been there for 6 years, the conductor retired, and I had been doing a lot of writing for the band, both compositions and arrangements, and one of those was a setting of the history of the Coast Guard to original music.
Right.
And to this day, I'm convinced that was a good part of the reason that I ended up being chosen, because I was only 27 when I became the conductor.
My gosh, yeah, right.
Yeah. And because we only have one band other than the recruit band at Cape May, New Jersey, I didn't get transferred around from band to band like my peers in the other services.
Right.
So between getting the job at age 27 and staying in one place, I actually retired as the longest serving conductor of a single service band in American history. There was a Marine band director who was director for 29 years,
Uh-huh.
and I was director for 29 years and 4 months.
Wow. Oh,
Wow.
there you go. That's the way to
And
do
I
it.
didn't even know it until I retired. My staff looked it up and
Right.
discovered that.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow. Well, because if you had been deployed, that would have been really bad.
Well,
Deployed because nothing else to
you,
go to.
let me put it this way: you don't want me serving on a ship or an airplane.
That's fantastic. What a story. What was your hometown in Florida? The first one?
Tiny little town called Lake Placid, in central Florida, just south of Sebring.
Yeah, there's another Lake Placid, but it's much
It's
further
not that
north.
one.
Yeah, it's the other one. That's fantastic. I also came from a small school, but I think the Eastman Path. Mark Lusk is a friend of mine as well, who was great. At one point, he was subbing with the Chicago Symphony while doing his doctorate at Northwestern, but he also had just come off the road with who in the world was it? The Woody Herman Band. So he was bass trombone. So he didn't have to do jazz. So he was top of the world in both the jazz world and also the classical world. But he came from a high school of 5 graduates in Kentucky.
Really?
And then went to Eastman and won the Low Brass Award at Eastman and ended up starting his career out like that. So it's interesting coming from the small school, and I came from a relatively small school too. I'm not sure about you, Dave.
Mine was small.
Connecticut, yeah, small school. So you end up getting to do a lot more early on.
Right.
So that's actually a big advantage. And then you ended up into the big time. Like I was afraid when I finally went from small school in Pennsylvania to Marywood College, a Catholic women's college, which had just switched over to accepting guys. Very small college. To all of a
What was
sudden,
your motivation to go to that school? Was
And
it
it was-
music or was it?
it was a choice between West Point in its last year as all male, or go to a Catholic women's college in its first year accepting males.
Yeah. What to do? What to do?
I wonder. Yeah, no, it had nothing to do with that. It had more to do with familiarity.
Yeah.
But I was scared to death when I went to Penn State because now all of a sudden I'm competing with people who went to quote unquote real schools. And I found that I got a wonderful education. I was very well prepared. So, but you have no way of knowing until you immerse yourself in those sort of things. So now you retire from the Coast Guard, and how do you end up back in Florida?
Well, when I retired, the director of a local community orchestra stepped down, and I won that position, and I did that for 7 years in Connecticut.
Right. Okay.
And there was a wonderful, wonderful community band in the Boston area that I'd always known about because a friend of mine was the conductor.
Right.
And that position opened up, and I won that. It's the Metropolitan Wind Symphony.
Right. We've heard of
It's
it.
an all audition group.
Right.
It's just phenomenal. And I was blessed to conduct that group for 12 years. I just loved it. But my wife and I she grew up in New York State, and we'd lived in
Ah.
New England our entire adult lives together. And we finally, in 2018, said, we got to get out of New England for one January, February period.
Right.
We had a friend who had been in the Met Winds who had moved into the Villages, Florida, and I'd never heard of it, but he lobbied hard to get us down there. So we went there for 2 months, and
Right.
it was just crawling with music. The first week we were there, we sat in on the concert band rehearsal.
Right.
They have 3 adult concert bands of 65 to 70 people and
Holy
a
smoke.
wind ensemble.
Right.
And so we got involved in that deeply in the 2 months that we were there, and kind of looked at each other and said, this is pretty nice. So we thought about it for the next 6 months, and I ended up retiring from the Met Winds
Right.
and came down to the Villages.
Right. Fantastic. Is there a vocal and orchestral as well going on in the Villages?
There is everything you can imagine going on down
Oh,
here.
that's great.
In terms of general interest, when we first got here, I heard somebody say, if you're interested in anything, there's a club that's doing that.
Right. Yeah.
And I saw the statistics. They have 3,500 clubs
Oh my
of
gosh.
different
Holy smokes.
uh, everything you can possibly imagine, photography, bridge, swimming. It's just crawling with clubs.
How many?
And that includes the music world. There are concert bands, there are two orchestras, there are small groups like tuba ensembles and German bands and Dixieland bands and just all the music that you can imagine. My wife, who is a very good French horn
Right.
player, and I both were playing 5 days a week.
Oh my.
We had rehearsed
Wow.
every week. And we finally decided, wait a minute, this is supposed to be retirement. It's starting to feel like a
Right.
job.
Right.
So we have backed off a little bit.
Yeah.
But I was conducting the jazz workshop group
Right.
until I started getting other stuff, and I let go of that to make room for other things. But I still am playing lead trumpet in that and lead trumpet in the swing band, which I also conduct.
Right.
I am conducting a British brass band, and I just became conductor of the wind ensemble down here, which is the group I had really hoped for because they're a really fine group, very musical. We're doing Lincoln Sharposi on our next
Oh my
concert,
goodness.
and
Yeah.
that's with a retiree group.
Right. And is that? Do you have YouTube? Or connections on YouTube to hear what these groups sound like? Do they record?
Sometimes things get posted.
Yeah.
I'm not very involved in that, so I don't
I'll try to
really
look
know.
that up. I did look up villages, and I got that whole list of bands, which is really impressive, and then some of the small ensembles as well. It's incredible. But
Yeah.
I didn't think until this morning to look up the vocal groups and the orchestral groups and the accordion terrorists.
Right.
Like I'm
Yeah,
sure
yeah,
there must be a
accordion
polka
terrorists.
band there.
Yeah.
Is there a
Many.
Let me I just was curious that with the groups that you are involved with or that are also down there, how many of them do you go in by audition, or how many are just, I played, you play a little bit for somebody and say, okay, give it a shot, pal.
Most of them are that way. With the wind ensemble, we don't use that A word,
Okay.
but I do listen to anybody I don't already know before we bring them into the group.
Yeah. Yeah.
And-
Got it.
But we don't use the A word.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You don't use it. Oh, okay.
Well, I tease everyone that the Jamestown Community Band, it's a select ensemble. Whoever selects to be in it is in it.
Yeah.
It's that kind of
Right.
selectivity. Well, that's good to know.
Yeah, one of the other questions I had for you is that, and we've talked about it a lot, is that in a band or musical situation, performing group, whatever, as your citizens become older, they may lose their ability to be able to play as effectively as they did before. So how do you deal with that?
It's really simple. You be humane.
Right.
We had an individual in one of the groups that I conduct who was starting to get into the edge of dementia kinds of things.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And he sent me an email and said, if you think it would be better, I'll drop out. And I immediately gave him a call and I said, not a chance in the world. We'll figure out a way to make it work. We'll work with your section leader, try to put you in places where you're comfortable. And because of that, he was able to play for 2 more years before he and his wife finally decided he had to let go of it.
Yeah.
Right.
But that's the attitude that's down here. And it's one that I wholeheartedly support. There's so much, as you know, so many statistics out there about how good for the aging process and the brain music is.
Yeah, right.
Because it forces the brain to work in certain kinds of ways that other things don't. So
Right.
we all want to play as well as we can down here, but perfection is far from being the final goal.
Right.
The final goal is to really enjoy it and do it and just be out there with people doing something that is so clearly good for all of us.
The process outweighs the product. Which is in
Yes.
school music. We looked at that. I looked at it that way as well. In school music,
Right.
when it came time to contest and stuff like that, that was for a very specific reason. But that wasn't the vast majority of time. The vast majority of the time you're spent just doing the process and enjoying being part of that. Now, that's how different was that from the Coast Guard band? Because now there's a different standard for each seat. So how did that work?
The answer to that is it's as different as a local community orchestra is from the Boston Symphony.
Right. Yeah. Right. Very difficult to get in.
Very, very high level of, just to give you one crazy example, we used to, I don't know what they're doing now, but we used to ask for audition tapes before we invited somebody to audition live.
Right.
But once in a while, we'd get into a situation where we had a time crunch and just couldn't do it.
Right.
We had a tuba vacancy, and we had to just put out the word, and we'll take anybody who comes to audition.
Right.
52 tuba players showed up
Right.
for one vacancy.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
The point being that when you've got that kind of coverage, you're going to get great players.
Right.
And we have great players, have always had great players.
No, there's no doubt about it. My son, who's in 3 symphonies, 3 part-time symphonies, Annapolis, he's right in the D.C. area, Annapolis, Maryland, and Virginia Symphony. His best friend is a tuba player trying to get a military band position. And there aren't many tuba positions in military band, the top military bands. So it is extremely competitive to get into that. Was Gary Buttery the person who came and showed up, or was that later?
No, this was much later. Gary had been in the group for a long time at that point.
Yeah, and he's still at it. He's a great guy.
Yep.
And he was definitely, my connection was, oddly enough, when you toured up to northern Michigan, the Upper Peninsula, God forbid, to the Siberia of the American military. When Gwynn Air Force Base closed, that place changed a great deal. But I think that's one of the reasons you were coming up there. And it was right before I had been accepted to come and do an interview here at the University of Rhode Island. And I think like the very next week, within days, I noticed the Coast Guard band was going to be nearby. So I ended up talking to Brian Sparks, who was your sax soloist at the time. But I ended up spending most of my time talking to Gary Buttery. So then when I arrived back here, as my wife had to follow me like 4 or 5 months later. So I was very much alone. And I think the second weekend it was here, Gary called me up and he said, "Hey, band's playing at Ocean Beach." And he goes, we're having a lunch before, and then we're having a picnic after. Will you please come down? And I ended up hanging out with the Coast Guard band. I felt like a big hug, welcoming me to my new gig. And it was wonderful. I felt like a part of things. It was a wonderful experience. And that was the first time I heard the band too. It was like, oh my gosh, this is a little bit better than I had thought. But now the expectation set way high, as it should be. Now, Ken became I can't remember his last name, but it was the conductor, who replaced you as a conductor. Is he still conducting, or?
No, he was there, I believe, for 9 years.
Yeah.
And then Adam Williamson won the job.
Right. Okay.
After Ken.
So I have to go down and check out Adam, because I heard Ken conduct once or twice. And I haven't been down there since, unfortunately. But I'm going to make a point to getting down there again. So going back down to the main point in all of this, your perception. You talked about one person who emailed you and said, "I'm having problems. What do I do about it?" But there's the other side of that, the person who is not aware that they're struggling. And I run into that every once in a while too. Have you run into this, that it's a person who's not aware that they're struggling and is hurting the section? And typically is the leader of the section, because
little harder parts.
It's a little bit harder parts. Any suggestions about how to handle that? I mean, we're still in the humanly thing, but
Right. I've always, we've only been down here 5 years, and I've only been conducting as opposed to leading jazz band for 3 of those years.
Right.
I've just been honest with people.
Right.
And said, I need to move you to a different chair. I want to bring in somebody else to be the principal player, or whatever it is.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And some people take it well and some people don't.
Right.
But one of the things that I've always made clear is we will never, quote unquote, fire you. You will be here as long as you want to be here, if we can possibly make that happen.
Right. Well, that's more difficult in the wind ensemble setting, correct? Because it's one person per part.
It is, but we can always bring somebody in if we need to.
To double that. Yeah. And that's what,
Double the fun.
yeah,
Yeah.
Coretta Tomato, Dr. Tomato, who we had in the last episode, whose music therapy background, suggested that to have someone who, could just physically nudge someone when they get off, because Dave talked about that with a guy who was in his band when he formed the Wakefield band here, who would get off and be off for like 20 bars without being aware of it. During a performance. So you need someone to...
Amazing. And he was a trumpet player, but he was a trumpet player, and he just had a bad sense of time, of rhythm, things like that. But the thing is, he would come in on his part and not be aware of the fact that he was entirely off from everybody else. And he'd finish his part, put his horn down his lap, and look around like, what the hell's wrong with everybody? You know what I mean? Incredible. But he was a one.
Well, haven't seen anything like that here.
Oh, okay. I was the first.
I don't know. This Villages place is starting to sound good for me. This might
I know,
be a commercial for them.
I know.
That's good.
Well, I think the reason is because the attitude permeates down here.
Right. Maybe.
We will help you try to make it work if it's at all possible.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
There's nobody down here who's pretending that the goal is perfection. We get as close to it as we can with what we are and who we are, because it's fun to try to play well.
Yeah.
But that's not the goal. That's not the measurement of success.
Are you aware of other community bands down in that region? And there are other retirement villages, retirement developments all throughout Florida.
Right.
Are they similar to this, or is there any awareness? So you've only been there for 5 years, so maybe not.
Yeah, I don't really know. The groups that I do know are just regular community bands,
Right.
not retirement communities, and some of them are phenomenally good.
Right.
There's one in Jacksonville at the university that I've guest conducted, the First Coast Wind Ensemble, it's called.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just a wonderful group. It's comparable to the Met Winds up in the Boston area.
Right. So you're doing some guest conducting while you're down in Florida.
Yes.
Have you been traveling as well, or just staying pretty much around Florida?
No, we've been staying pretty close to home.
Right.
We're both in the late 70s, and traveling is, the balance between the pleasure and the work and the travel is shifting as we get older.
Yes, I hear you.
Well, my retirement folks are talking about go, slow go, and then no go. The 3 stages, and the slow go can kind of slow it down, but it sounds like you're just active enough, particularly doing the golf thing. Wait, there was one other question from a while ago. How many people live in the villages? What is that? Do you have any idea what the population is? I probably could have looked that up too.
Well, it's changing really rapidly right now.
Huh?
It was when we first got here, something like 35,000.
Right.
Wow.
But it's exploding in size.
Oh.
It was a family-owned organization, and the original owner said, we'll never go below. There's an east-west county road on the south side of what used to be the villages.
Right.
He said, we'll never go below Route 44. Well, he passed away and his kids took over, and now there are thousands and thousands of homes
Right.
south of Route 44. So I wouldn't be surprised if it's doubled in size.
Yeah.
Wow.
I noticed the same thing. Well, my mother-in-law lived in Century City near Boca, and I had no idea the scale. There was over 7,200 apartments, condos, right? And the auditorium was seating 1,200. And that's when I started getting an idea of the scope, the size of, like what was going on there. So different. So the music stores, they must do very well down there supplying.
Actually, there aren't any really near us because we're in an area where there are no large cities near us.
Right. Okay. So that's talking about an entrepreneurial opportunity. Yeah.
Right. Tampa, Orlando.
Right.
Jacksonville are all a minimum of an hour away.
Right. Okay. But not.
And there was one local music store when we got down here in the small town that is adjacent to the villages, and it closed last year. Just not enough business.
There's a lot of stuff you could do online, but repairs and things like that you can't. So is there a local repairman, or they're usually affiliated with stores? But
no, you really got to go an hour to get the kind of sophisticated work done that you do if you're a professional player to keep your instruments in shape.
Well, we'll get the word out to that
Opportunity.
sounds like a fantastic. Do any of the ensembles tour? Do any of the ensembles travel, or all the performances pretty much on campus?
I'm not aware of anything that takes place outside the villages
Right.
other than in the immediate surrounding communities. I mean, there are local opportunities to play.
Yeah.
All of us who are
Mm.
relatively high-level jazz players, for example, get called in to sub in local off villages, big bands when
Right.
they need somebody.
And I'll bet churches do very well too around Easter. With
Oh, yeah.
we trumpeters do very well around Easter, even
Well, not
percussionists.
only that, but as you probably know, churches in the South are much bigger than
Right.
churches in the North, and they have really good budgets for music and so
Yeah,
forth.
they have the band, the minister in the band. That kept my son, who's a bass player, who's in the three
Ah,
symphonies during COVID. That's what paid the bills. That's what kept him going
right.
because he was playing Sunday mornings. Now he identifies as Jewish, as most of the rest of the members. They were all kids from Peabody that started.
Yeah.
One got the job at a Southern Baptist church near there. And
Mm.
eventually he brought on all his friends. Almost all of them were Jewish. And during the
Yes.
COVID thing, you would see the minister on the screen and the band, and that was it. And he was hired,
Yeah.
he was paid to be there every Sunday to
Right.
do that broadcast, and that was the only money coming in. So it saved him, you know. So in a strange way, it really worked out well for him. But so no touring ensemble. So I'm going to bounce something off you that I hadn't brought up before, but it looks like it's going to start happening. I hadn't shared this with Dave yet either. One of our members, we announced that the 14-year-old in the band had just qualified for All-State. So we got a big applause and everything else. And one of our older members who decided at 75 to try something new and learned an instrument, she's a brilliant woman, came up and said, she goes, well, why don't we have Old State? Why do we just have All-State? Why is it just for the school kids? And it's like, oh my gosh. Well, first of all, we can't call it that, So we are actually about ready to get started with working with the university to use their facilities, All-State Golden Division. We have a junior division and a senior division in the schools, and I was president of the Rhode Island Music Educators. So now we're going to add on, not affiliated with Rhode Island Music Educators, though we'll talk to them about it, a golden division, and try to run a one-day festival. And have people come in. I don't know that it's going to be by audition to start with. We'll have to see how it develops. But, send the music out, do a rehearsal in the morning, a quick dress rehearsal early afternoon, concert late afternoon to get everyone home before dark. Then do
And when everyone's lip is shot.
and have a one-day festival. I'll bet that would work pretty well down there too.
I wouldn't be
Yeah,
surprised.
it's everything else works. So let me see if we get this started. And one of the spin-offs for that, I set up a trip, and this one it kind of ended. It was a tour, a concert tour for the All-Stars. I thought involve all the community bands from the region, and just gather together all-stars who could afford it and wanted to do this, and go over. I had an agency that could connect us with bands in Hungary as well as Bulgaria, that we go and do exchange concerts with them. So you get to sit and collaborate with musicians from the other side of the pond. And it looked fantastic. And the trip was like around $3,000. Money wasn't the problem. The problem was I couldn't get people to commit a year in advance.
Oh,
Right at our age, you're starting
might
to
not
think
be around.
a year from now. I don't even buy green bananas anymore. The old joke, right? We had people who had plenty of money, and some were willing to say, "I'll provide like 3 tickets to go, or 4 tickets to go if this thing flies." But we couldn't get people to sign up, not one, because no one could commit a year in advance. So I don't know if I could get a travel agency. It's tough to set something like that up.
I guess.
Less than a year of planning everything, particularly the plane and everything else. So I don't know, just thoughts, but we're hoping to we have this thing called Ollie, which it took over from Elder Hostel. I don't know if you probably recognize Elder Hostel. Now it's Ollie. So that's also, so we're affiliating it with that, and they run trips all the time.
yeah.
That or that kind of thing. So we're going to see if we can maybe get something like that happening through Ollie. Is Ollie active down in the villages? Is that like,
I'm not aware of
yeah,
it.
what are there education? I'm sure there's educational opportunities though, right? Are there?
I'm not sure if they're.
Huh?
I'm not sure what's available. I don't hear much talk about that.
Yeah.
Everything is mostly recreational.
Right. There you go.
Oh,
So
that
that's
makes sense, yeah.
the golf thing. We talked about golf. Now, did you golf before you headed down there, or
Yes, but not as assiduously as I do.
and which courses do you do? Yeah, you have. I mean, it's really inexpensive, but it takes a long time to do the executive courses, from what I hear. Right? They're very crowded.
Not so
Oh,
much.
well, yeah.
We- I can't remember the number. They don't talk about how many courses they have down here. They talk about how many holes they have,
Oh, okay.
and
Right.
it's an absurdly high number.
Right.
But there are probably, I'm off the top of my head, there are probably 15 to 20 so-called championship courses, meaning normal
Right. Hmm.
par 72 courses,
Right.
and half again as many executive courses, which are 9-hole
Right.
courses that are almost all par threes. They might have one or two par fours,
Right.
no par
I
fives.
think my favorite part of the Masters tournament was yesterday. I love that. I love the par three competition in that. So
Yeah.
there's a lot to be said for that. So that's you golfed a little bit when you were up here in the Northeast, but not
Yeah, I
much.
used to golf 6 or 8 times a summer.
Yeah, right. And I was kind of the same. I'm finding that I'm able to golf a little bit more now. Dave is not going to do that. Right?
I don't golf. I don't golf.
But I remember when I was
Wait a
doing.
minute, at some point, somebody said, "Look, don't go chasing a ball around the greens. You got to find something else to do."
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, Dick Bundy was a very close friend when I was at Penn State doing my doctorate. And he was finishing off his dissertation, and his statistician was Dennis Rhodes, was an excellent golfer, fantastic golfer. And Dick and I were not that great. We ran into him on the course one time, and his was based on pitch and rhythm errors were part of the thing for the statistics. And he was
Yeah.
like a hole behind us, and he'd see Dick hit a shot and he'd go, rhythm error, rhythm error. Or pitch error when he was close to the green. It was kind of funny how we tied the whole thing together. So maybe that'll be the same thing for you. All right. So we ask all of our guests the same questions to wrap things up, and you're able to interject anything you want as we go. But first question is, what was your most memorable experience with a community music ensemble for life? Somewhere in there, or one or more.
With a community group, probably almost certainly with the Met Winds. They play at such a high level.
Right.
We played twice for Association of Concert Bands conventions.
Right.
And are very, very well received. I would say those were the highlights.
Right. There was a festival up in, I don't know if it's still going on in Boston, of community bands every year.
The Festival of Bands,
Festival of
that
Bands.
is run.
Yeah.
The Metropolitan Wind Symphony runs that.
Oh, okay, cool. At Nathaniel Hall or one of those halls right there, right?
Right.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
I've actually participated in that once or twice too. I didn't know who ran it. That's
Well, obviously, we played in it every year
right.
because it was our
Right.
Yeah.
It was easy to get an invitation. Right. So
Yes.
that's cool. So that was a bit of a surprise to you when you came out. You retire and think, well, that's the end of my high level of music, and all of a sudden this comes about.
No, it wasn't that big a surprise.
Okay.
I knew I wanted to keep conducting, and
Right.
I had enough of a reputation by then because of the Coast Band that people were interested in having me apply.
Right. Yeah. Guest conducting. You get you don't have to apply. You get invited. Right.
Right.
That's good.
Yeah.
I'm still waiting for those invitations, Lew. No.
Well, I did have to
I don't
apply to
wait
be
for those.
They had a competition.
Yeah. Right. That's good. I can see why you won. What was a big challenge with an ensemble, and how was it overcome?
You mean with a community
With a
band?
community band, yeah.
It's hard to say because the Met Winds is so well run.
Right.
Leslie Hansen's been the president for decades. She was one of the founding members.
Right.
And they have an excellent board of directors. And I really never had any major problems with them when I was there. I understood my role pretty well. I worked for them. My job was to try to find the balance between whatever I wanted to do and whatever they wanted to do, although we never were at odds about those things. It was kind
That's
of
good.
interesting. When I was auditioning, I talked to individuals over and over again. What are you guys looking for in your next conductor? They gave us each an entire concert cycle to audition.
Wow.
And it was as if they had gotten together and said, this is what we're going to say, because every single person said in one way or another, we're looking for someone who can take us to the next level.
Wow. Hmm.
And and that was what I was hoping to do and what I think we did. You can still see quite a lot of our live performances on YouTube.
Oh, great. I'll make sure I
Yeah.
check that out. And it sounds like, as far as that thing with issues, the bands you're involved with now at the Villages sound like a finely tuned instrument themselves. They're kind of running themselves, correct?
That's right. Yeah, I think that's a fair description.
Uh-huh.
Just to give you an idea of the Met winds, though,
Sure.
there's a guy named Pat Patterson in Texas who specializes in writing massive orchestra works for concert band. And he does faithful transcriptions. He does not change the keys.
Right.
He doesn't take a flute solo and give it to some other instrument
Right.
if there's,
Hmm.
and he did a transcription of The Rite of Spring, Stravinsky,
Wow.
Yep.
and we played it.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And I asked him how many other community bands had played it. He just laughed. He said, "You're the first group that wasn't a military band or a college band."
Right. Yeah. There you go. So the violin parts are mostly assigned to clarinets?
He spread them around all over
Did
the
he?
place. He's really, really good at making it sound almost as if the piece was originally written
Right.
for band.
Well, to Holst who's the first master of doing that,
Right.
I think I did it for a brass band, right? At the time, instead from full
Yeah.
orchestra, he'd write both, and then Leroy Anderson too. Like when you do the Leroy Anderson stuff, there's two.
Right.
There's the orchestral, but there's only one name there. There's not an arranger. It's Leroy Anderson did both, which is great. And I know
Exactly.
are you doing arranging now too? Have you continued that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have quite a lot of published compositions and arrangements.
Yeah, I remember the one that stood out for me was Yellow Rose of Texas for Dan. I can't think of the baritone solo was really, really cool. Well, I did one for you, Bride of the Waves. I did that for myself to play, which ended up being a little bit of a disaster.
Yeah,
'Cause we
it was
ended up-
fine.
Our drummer was suffering from something, so Dave was conducting while I was playing, and then at the last minute we had to put him on drums. So I had to conduct and play at the same time, and I definitely would have played it better because my mind was there was just too many things to think about. Like at times I was distracted.
Sure.
Yeah.
I just did that actually. I arranged the accompaniment to the Yellow Rose for brass band,
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
and I played it with the brass band that I conduct.
Oh,
Our
cool.
assistant
Yeah.
conductor conducted it,
Oh, that is
you
a
know.
great arrangement. I remember enjoying listening to Dan. So one more question.
Well,
I'll let you-
you're going to give me the last
I
one again.
fogged it.
Okay,
Yeah,
yeah,
right.
yeah. Well, always the question is with the advancements in technology and what's happening so much in the world, how do you see the future of community bands and ensembles developing?
I don't see a lot of change because the fundamental joy of what a community band is people coming together as people with their instruments and playing.
Right.
And while there's no question that some of the technological advances allowed us to do things during COVID when we couldn't get together
Yeah.
that we would not have otherwise been able to do, it's still not the same. It doesn't even come close to the same experience as a bunch of us getting together, sitting down in a room and playing.
Right.
Right.
And so I just don't see that going away anytime soon.
Yeah, COVID in a way may have helped it because we missed it so desperately during that time.
I think you can make that argument.
Yeah, it was hard getting some groups back up and running, and I'll bet there were some groups that couldn't get back up and running. I was looking through samples for people to listen to a song that I was there and found a band out in Ohio that didn't recover from COVID. There was a recording. I thought, oh, it'd be great to get in touch with them, and it turned out there was no way to get in touch with them. They folded, and the recording was prior to COVID, and it's just and that broke my heart. It had been a band around for a long time, and some of these bands have been around for a long time. How long is the Coast Guard band?
Well, it's an interesting question
Yeah.
because on September 28th,
Yep.
the Coast Guard Band is going to celebrate its centennial.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Wow.
And I'll be coming up to guest conduct as well as Ken Megan.
Oh, good.
Cool.
So I'll make sure, like I'll have to get a ticket for that one. That
Little side note.
maybe a little bit hard and
yeah.
a great little advertisement. So we've advertised the villages, the Coast Guard band.
Yeah, we got a little side note is that the first band I ever heard, I think I was 5. And the first band I ever heard was the Coast Guard band. I was very impressed by that as a kid.
Yeah.
I was real twitchy, you know what I mean? So I was drawn to the trombone because there was a lot of motion there. But then when I saw what the percussionists were doing, I said, "Forget it. I'm going to be a percussion guy." So
He's been afflicted with percussionists.
I've been afflicted with percussion
since that time, and I keep surrounding him with trumpet players.
I know it,
in
yeah.
these interviews.
Yes.
We'll have to get some percussionists along.
And I
too.
am trying. I started at the age of 68. I am trying to play French horn. That's a hard instrument. I just and you know what? I'm trying, and I have to admit I'm kind of failing.
Well, maybe Kelly can help him out. Does she do remote lessons?
Well, let me give you some encouragement. My wife was a pianist at Eastman, and she taught music for a few years and really didn't like it and became a computer person.
Oh,
Had a corporate career, retired as a vice president of a company, a very high level data processing thing. And at 52 said, I always regretted giving up trumpet. She had played trumpet in high school.
Right.
And she wanted to play French horn. So she started studying horn with one of the Coast Guard band players. And now she's one of the best 2 or 3 horn players in the villages down here and in great demand. So it's never too late.
Yeah.
there you go. So many positive notes. I'm so glad we were able to do this, Luke. Thank you
nice
so
job.
much for the time.
Yeah.
And
Thank you for reaching out. I was just shocked, voice from the past.
the kind that you want to hear, hopefully, right? There's
Oh, absolutely.
yeah, for sure. And I'll look forward to reconnecting again. And certainly September 28th. We'll look forward to seeing you at that point, but hopefully before then. Who knows? Maybe a trip down. We get down to Florida every once in a while. So maybe we'll stop by and check out the villages. I'll certainly let you know when we're in the region. And it's certainly let me know when you're up this way, too. So we can reconnect. All right. So we always end the same way with the same thing.
We try anyway.
If you saw one of our podcasts, and join in. Just keep on playing.